computer. Yes. All right.
Okay, good.
Oh, thank you.
Are we all connected now?
We are.
I think so.
Okay. Well, it's great to be with you again this evening and talk about chapters 4 and chapter 5, which talks about building that encouraging atmosphere, which is chapter 4, and then chapter 5, helping children have a healthy life and what can make a difference there. And I thought, if it's okay, I'm going to begin by answering your question. Okay, there's the question. I'm going to just read it. How do you allow a child to attempt to present reasons why they should be allowed to have or do something without it turning into an argument? And then you mentioned pages 85, 86 in my Christian parenting book, where I talk about that. And certainly there are no easy answers at all. And yet there's a way that we can do that. I think it's always important to remember the passage in Corinthians. When I was a child, I thought like a child, I talked like a child, I reasoned like a child. And so parents need to recognize that up until about the age of maybe 11 or 12, it's probably okay to give reasons. But then after the age of 12, we don't want to give reasons. In a sense, we want to put it on the child to explain why that's a good solution. And so the example I use in my book, and I use all the time when I speak on parenting, is if a teenager this Friday night says, "Mom, Dad, I want to stay out till 3 in the morning," Mom and Dad are not going to say, "God bless you, have fun." Mom and Dad are going to say, "Well, that's not a healthy reason. And I always have your best interest at heart." And so Mom and Dad could be Jesus and come up with the best reasons in the world. And again, I think it's important that a parent not give reasons, but Mom and Dad, especially with teenagers, could say, people are drinking and driving late at night. There's more kooks out there after midnight. The later you stay out, the more mischief you're going to get into. And the teenager's not going to say, "Well, Mom, Dad, those are excellent reasons. I don't want to stay out till 3 in the morning." They're still going to say that they want to stay out till 3 in the morning. And so what I think is important is to either ask the teenager, "What are the reasons you want to stay out till 3 in the morning? Please explain yourself and why that's a good idea to stay out till 3 in the morning." And so let the teenager come up with the reasons, or the child, if it's a younger child, and the child, if the teenager says, "Well, the youth pastor is having a lock-in and we're going to have a devotion, then we're going to play volleyball, then we're going to watch a movie, and then the youth pastor rented a bus and is taking all the kids home at 3 o'clock. Well, now Mom and Dad probably change their mind and allow their teenager to stay out till 3, because they have a very good activity of growing in their faith in Christ and selecting wise friends and being around other Christian friends. If a child, be it a child under the teenage years or a teenager, still wants to keep coming back and saying, "I want to do this, I want to do this," Mom and Dad can use 3 phrases. "I love you too much to argue with you. I'm sorry you feel that way." If the teenager was just wanting to stay out with their friends and it wasn't a church lock-in. "And if I were your age, if I was 16, I'd probably want to stay out till 3 in the morning as well." And so those are good comebacks, recognizing that the teenager still may not agree if they wanted to stay out with their friends till 3. And I think another key idea, 2 more key ideas, I should say, is to share with the child, this is healthy for you. Try to avoid the words right or wrong. There's a lot of things in life that are not right and wrong, and that kind of dichotomous thinking can cause anger in a child. So if Mom or Dad says, "This is just not healthy for you," or a good phrase Mom and Dad can use is, "I always have your best interest at heart, and I don't think for you to do this or that," whether it's a teenager wanting to stay out till 3 in the morning or a child saying, "I just want chocolate cake for dinner tonight," for Mom and Dad to say, "That's not healthy for you," and I have your best interest at heart, and I don't think that's in your best interest. And then the other skill that I think can be very beneficial is what I call the 3-part assertive response, where parents echo back. And I think that's in the previous simple yet very effective habit lesson right before the lessons on page 85, 86. Mom and dad, the 3 parts are to echo, use the word and, never say but, and then again, use that phrase, this is healthy or this is in your best interest. So years ago, I saw a mom, single mom. She had a 17-year-old son who was pretty rebellious and pretty defiant. And I saw her on a Friday with her son, and I counseled the son. And before counseling the son, I met with the mom, and I went over the 3-part assertive response. And I practiced with her in the room over and over by having her do different scenarios. I heard you say and, I heard you say and, I heard you say and, this is healthy. Well, that was my last session of the day. It was 5:30, and after mom and son left, I locked up the office and I went out to my car. And all of a sudden, as I locked the door, the teenager burned rubber in our parking lot. Now, thank goodness there were no other cars in the parking lot. Pretty much everyone had left the office park, but he was burning rubber leaving. And mom looked at me and said, Dr. Schroeder, thank you, thank you, thank you. She said, I used the 3-part assertive response. Usually he would wear me down and I'd give in and let him do what he wanted. And he had a curfew. I don't remember what it was, but let's say it was midnight, and he wanted to stay out, the teenager, till 1 or 2 in the morning. And mom kept coming back with, I heard you say you want to stay out till 1 or 2 in the morning, and your curfew's midnight. And the teenager gave her a hard time again. And she said, I heard you say you want to stay out till 1 in the morning, and your curfew's midnight, and I think that's healthy for you. Mom said that she had to say that about 7 or 8 times, but after saying it 7 or 8 times, the teenager realized that mom was not going to give in, and that's why he got in the car and burned rubber and left the parking lot. And so use the 3-part assertive response. Use the I love you too much. I sorry you feel that way. I'm sorry, if I were your age, I'd probably feel the same way. And I love you too much to argue with you. What are your reasons for wanting to do this? And please explain the reasons why you think that's a good choice for you. So hopefully that answered the question. And it's not easy, but I think mom and dad need to be brief, ask questions, and not get into an argument and just kind of end it and nicely walk away.
I think so. I was the one that posed that question, and it stemmed from a conversation that I also had with my sisters, who they all have older kids that are high school and middle school. But then, so we were talking about having them give reasons for wanting to do certain things, and my one sister was like, well, they would give reasons. They're not going to be good reasons, but they're going to give me all sorts of reasons they can come up with, like all sorts of things, but none of them are going to be good. And so it comes down to then, now I'm going to start arguing with my kid about what's a good reason. What's the definition of a good reason? And then that gets into another discussion or argument.
Yeah, and that's a good point that your sisters are asked. And it comes back to the 3-part assertive response in, especially with teenagers. I heard you say this is your reason, and I don't think that's a good reason. Never use but. But's an eraser. I can say you're a wonderful Christian mom, but, and I just erased wonderful Christian mom. So I heard you say this is your reason, and I don't think that's a healthy reason. And this is what I think is healthy for you. And this is what I think is in your best interest. And mom and dad can use that 3-part assertive response several times, and eventually just lovingly say, I love you too much to argue with you. And very nicely, not in an abrupt way, in a mean way, but very nicely, then walk away after saying, I love you too much to argue with you. Okay.
Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah. There, and I'm going to say it again, but being a parent is a challenge. and there's no easy answers, but yet if we have these simple yet very effective habits, they can make a huge difference in creating a loving, encouraging atmosphere in the home. So
I consider myself a very patient person, but to have to say that to my child 7 times, I feel like it's going to take the power of the Holy Spirit in me to continue to just repeat myself like a broken record.
Yeah, no, it can be a challenge, but this mom, and sadly, the mom I mentioned with the teenager burning rubber in the parking lot, her husband was an unhealthy husband, or her ex-husband, I should say. She was divorced. Like I said, she was a single mom, and he would let the son probably stay out till 3 a.m. if it was his weekend, and so she was combating that, and she was at her wit's end, and that's what gave her patience, Jessica. She was at her wit's end, and so she just said, it used to be Dave and Carol. I don't know if you remember this, Jessica. There used to be record players, and a record would get stuck and it would just keep replaying over and over. Now, Carol, Dave, and I remember that, but you got to be a broken record, and that broken record is kind of the 3-part assertive response.
Okay.
So, Dr. Randy, did you advise the mom to have a conversation with her teen back home about burning rubber in the car, or was that going to go undiscussed?
Well, that's a great question, Carol. And I think a lot of times parents want to deal with every issue. And I don't remember if that came up, but I would suggest that she just let it go. He was emotional, made a poor choice. Thank goodness he didn't hit another car or hit anyone. You two are educators, and back in the 70s, I was an educator, a Lutheran high school teacher, and my first year was chaotic. I did not have good discipline. Part of it was, in kind of response to your question, if a youngster looked sideways, and they weren't talking, but they just looked sideways, I would correct that. I was correcting every little thing. Well, eventually, the students get tired of being corrected all the time, and my classroom became chaotic. Experienced teachers know, and you guys know, you kind of let the little things go in a classroom and you just deal with the big issues, and that keeps a good learning environment in the classroom. So so I think I would have suggested, I don't remember if she asked me or not, but that she just let that go. That's a good question.
Jessica, tell us what the ages of your 3 kids are.
11, 8, and 5.
Okay.
So my 11-year-old's on the border of the 12-year-old cutoff here.
And you're seeing
you're getting close to the teen years. Yeah,
I'm feeling it.
Okay. Yeah, and they want their independence. And again, we talked about this the first 2 visits. The goal of Christian parenting is to help a child learn obedience and to make good, responsible decisions. I mean, that's the goal. And so, because once your 11-year-old hits 13, 14, they're going to start going away from home. And then, Mom, you're not going to be there, Jessica. Your husband, if another youngster says, hey, do you want to smoke a cigarette? Well, now your 11-year-old, when they're 13, 14, they're going to have to make a good decision and say, hey, no, I don't want to do that. That's bad for my health. So that these ideas, the whole goal is obedience. God wanted obedience with Adam and Eve. We as Christian parents want, and grandparents want, obedience from our children and grandchildren. Okay.
We have a couple other viewers who are off camera. One is a grandma and the other one has 5 children.
Okay.
Quite young.
Okay. Well, and if there's any questions, just feel free to hop in and ask questions. Yeah. I'm going to look at chapter 4, just some of the high points there. I think there are about 8 or 9 simple yet effective habits in chapter 4. One of them is smiles, laughter, and humor, I call it. And I always laughing together connects a parent with a child. It's good to play or to watch comedy TV as long as it's healthy. A lot of times when parents play board games with their kids, as long as it doesn't get too competitive and it's kind of a fun board game or card game, it can be a lot of joking and laughing. And so that is essential in a home. And I think the other thing is parents need to smile and smile a lot at their kids. That also helps us individually have good attitudes. Kids younger than 5 are smiling and laughing all the time. And likewise, I think moms, dads, grandmas, and grandpas need to do a lot of smiling and a lot of laughter with a child to kind of connect. And so, and I always say, I just had a retired individual saw in counseling yesterday, and he was joking with me. And I said, that's great, because when you can have a sense of humor, that says you're emotionally healthy. So that's a good goal for all of us, to have a sense of humor and to laugh. And that also builds an encouraging atmosphere in our home. The simple habit, effective habit 46 is really, really important. And I label that, or I title that, lovingly speak with your pet. And we really need to watch our tone of voice and body language when talking to other individuals, but especially talking to kids, because 90% of what we say to each other comes through our tone of voice and body language. So I always use the example, if I had a pet, I see Carol and Dave have their dog right close to them. But if they were to kind of whisper and lovingly pet their pet and pat their pet and say, you are a vicious, brutal, mean beast. Well, what is their pet dog going to do? Wag its tail and want more petting. And but we could take the same pet that Carol and Dave have. One of them could move their hand up and down and say, you are a caring and a compassionate pet. And with that tone of voice and moving my hand up and down, their dog, their pet, is going to cower, afraid it's going to get hit. So I think we always need to remember, children do not hear tone of voice and body, words. They hear tone of voice and body language. In fact, words are only 7% of what we say to each other. Most of it comes through tone of voice and body language. Another key idea is a lot of parents believe that by correcting, kind of like I mentioned, I did the first year I was an inexperienced teacher, that all those corrections are going to help create a learning environment. And too many corrections and criticisms actually knock the self-worth out of a child and create a discouraging home environment. And so, excuse me, we really need to be careful, with not having too many C's. Another key idea to create an encouraging home environment would be never be sarcastic. Sarcasm is a no-no. And most of the time, 90% of the time, sarcasm is negative. And the Greek word for sarcasm is tearing of flesh. And sarcasm is kind of an emotional slap to a child. Hurts a child's self-worth. And I often say sarcasm is like having ice cream and eating with vinegar on top. No matter how good the ice cream is, the vinegar is going to make it taste horrible. And so, whenever there's sarcasm, somebody's the butt of the joke. And kids do not need to be the butt of the joke. Then another key idea, and I'm going to just
before you move
around
on to the next key idea, can I ask a question about sarcasm?
Sure.
You said negative sarcasm. Is there a such thing as positive sarcasm?
Well, I think there can be. I couldn't give you an example, Jessica.
This was something that my husband and I were discussing.
Yeah, positive sarcasm, what I would say would be teasing. Again, I think humor and laughter is good. And so positive teasing where the child is not the butt of the joke. I think that's the whole key, is that with sarcasm, a statement, it makes the other person, it's kind of a put down. They're the
Mhm.
butt of the joke. And so, good question. I don't know if there's positive sarcasm, but there is positive teasing and having fun with a child.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. I'm going to jump down. Well, I'm going to mention a couple others. 50 in this chapter 4, 50 simple yet effective habit is your expectations impact your child. And what I have found makes a huge difference if parents expect their kids to act 3 years older than they really are, and then their chronological age. That lifts a child up. So your 11-year-old, you would expect them to act like they're 14. And that helps them also become responsible. And kids live up, it's amazing, to what their parents expect. You know, I've had so many kids go to college, and I said, how did you go? What was the reason you decided to go to college? And they said, well, it seemed like my parents just expected that after I graduated high school, I'll go to college. So it was an expectation, whether it was verbalized or not verbalized, that the youngster's going to college. I can think of parents that I've counseled that, I talk about eating behaviors, and, they'll have a 4-year-old child, and the 4-year-old child is sitting on mom or dad's lap eating at the dinner table. Or the mom and dad are feeding the child, and the child's 4 years old. Well, that's not, if the chronological age is 4, that's certainly not treating a 4-year-old like a 7-year-old. And the 4-year-old then, rather than act like a 4-year-old, is acting like a 2-year-old, kind of a baby that they got to sit on mom and dad's lap and eat the food. So expectations are huge. And then 51, there are no perfect parents and there are no perfect children. Now, I know in school there are grades of A and A plus, but I say in life, because of sin and living in a fallen world, there is no A or A plus. The best anything in life can be is an A minus, because we're all imperfect and flawed as human beings. Our world is imperfect and flawed. So parents need to be happy when their children make mistakes. And a lot of times parents get concerned. No, that's a good thing. Mistakes are learning opportunities. And it gives a child a chance to learn responsible decision making. Because when they make a mistake, mom and dad can give a consequence or take away a privilege. The other side of it is, so there's no perfect parents, there's no perfect children. And so mom and dad need to give each other grace, and likewise give your child grace that they're not going to be perfect. They're going to make mistakes. And kind of tied to that dirty word perfect, perfectionism often causes a child to give up. I've seen so many kids in counseling that were brought in because mom and dad were perfectionistic, expected their child to be perfect, and nobody can be perfect. And so eventually the child just quits trying and starts failing in school because they're not perfect and they're not going to get the perfect grades and the perfect report card. And perfection can cause a lot of issues, from anxiety to obsessive compulsive disorder, eating disorders. Perfectionism is a horrible thing, and it's good enough. Kids are good enough, and they're doing the best they can, and mom and dad are doing the best they can. Any comments on that, anything from that chapter 4? I don't know if you looked at any of that or had any other thoughts there.
I had one more question.
Sure, that's good.
So I also homeschool, and wondered if you could, so I was a high school math teacher for 12 years before I started homeschooling, but the educator in me, I have to give correction. Like, I feel like I can't homeschool. I can't teach them. I can't let them just do a math problem wrong. I have to actually, so like if they're doing a problem set that's got 30 questions on it and they miss 7 of them, and I have to help correct them through it. Like I can physically see my son, as I correct him on each one, like he is like, just his posture starts to go, and because
Uh-huh.
he has some perfectionism tendencies as well. And so if he doesn't get every single one, or if he misses a spelling word, he's super hard on himself. And this has been something that, like, we've had to do things like, we're throwing little dance parties when he makes a mistake. So it's like, yes, you made a mistake. Like, that's good. We're doing something
Yeah.
new. Like, but yeah, if you could, if there's anything you could say in terms of like correcting,
Sure.
I don't know,
One
all the
thing-
time, I feel like I'm having to
I
correct.
think in a lot of Christian homes, because Christians especially want to please God and try to almost be perfect, and not sin in our thoughts, words, and actions. And so it's easy in a Christian home to be perfectionistic, to think about the best. And I really believe that in our homes, especially raising kids, we've got to be very, very cautious and maybe not ever use the words perfect or best. Now, if there's a youngster who's not giving a good effort, then you tell them, do your best. But for most kids in Christian homes, because parents have a tendency to be perfectionistic, it's very, very important to say just good. Give a good effort. It's good enough. You mentioned missing 7 problems out of 30. Well, that's good enough. And mistakes are learning opportunities. And I think the other thing is appreciate. And I'm going to talk about this in the next chapter, but appreciate the effort. I appreciate and compliment and use the word appreciate. I appreciate your effort on doing those 30 problems. And I appreciate your effort on improving. And so, I think to avoid the words perfect and best are really important a lot of times in most Christian homes, because that just stresses a child out, and it stresses mom and dad out as well.
Jessica, one of the things that I remember doing as a math teacher when I was teaching is, if I could find it, it didn't always happen, but if I could find it, like in your example of missing 7, perhaps there was actually one mistake made 7 times. In other words, and if you can identify that and say, you made one mistake. Now you made it 7 times, but it's just one mistake. So let's fix that one mistake, and that'll fix all 7 of them, or 2 mistakes.
Yeah.
That somehow helped a little bit.
I can
Good
see
point,
that for
Dave.
sure.
Good point. I think the other thing to tell your kids over and over, in fact, I just had an occasion to do that the other day with our 2 grandsons here in the area, is to tell your children, I love you for who you are, not what you do. I love you no matter what. You love your kids for who they are, not if they get all 30 problems right. They're your children, and you love them no matter what, like God loves us no matter what. And you're not loving them because of their accomplishments or achievements. That doesn't mean anything to your love. That's not why you love them. And so I think regularly to say, I love you for who you are and not what you do. And I love you for giving use the good word, good effort, and just keep giving a good effort. Good is good. In fact, there's somebody came up with perfection is the enemy of good, and it is. Okay.
I've never been homeschooled, so that adds a layer to the parenting. I can see that, Jessica, that you're discovering probably some things that we've never had to kind of deal with, other than teaching other things at home, but not total homeschooling.
Yeah.
And you bring up a good point, Dave, because it's true. Familiarity breeds contempt. And when you're with your kids all day long, that familiarity, being with them, can create extra stress. Like Dave, you said, an extra layer of stress being with your kids all day long. And so, that it's a little different. Kind of tied to that, I'm going to jump to chapter 5 in my Christian parenting book, Habits for a Happy, Healthy Life. And one of the things I'm going to mention is focus on effort and improvement, and maybe even talk about the parable of the talents in the New Testament. Quick summary: Jesus gave one individual 1 talent, another one 2 talents, another one 5 talents. The ones with 2 talents and 5 talents doubled their talents. And Jesus said, well done, good and faithful servant. You gave a good effort and you improved. And that's really all that all of us want to do every day, is give a good effort to live our life for Jesus and keep trying to improve in our Christian walk and talk. And the one with 1 talent buried it, did not give a good effort, did not improve. And Jesus said, you're lazy and you're wicked because you didn't give a good effort, you didn't improve. So we all have different talents. You have talents, all of you, that I don't have. I might have a few talents you don't have, but we all have different talents. But it doesn't make any difference what talents we have. All God is focused on is our effort and our improvement. And I mention often the bumper stickers that say, my child's an honor student. And I'm not fond of those bumper stickers because that's focused on achievement and accomplishment, not effort and improvement. There could be a youngster with a very high IQ and genius IQ, and they don't have to do any work. And because they're so smart, they don't do any work. They still get B's and A's, even though they should easily get straight A's by giving a good effort. There could be a youngster with a low IQ, a below average IQ, gives a good effort every day in every class, but all they get is their grades they achieve are C's and B's. And God in heaven is pleased, and they don't make the honor roll. And God in heaven is pleased with that youngster who did not make the honor roll, but continually, daily gives a good effort in every class, versus the genius student who did not give a good effort and yet made the honor roll. So I think it's important always for a mom and dad to just focus on effort and improvement and compliment effort and how a child is improving. Another key idea that I think parents often forget about is provide activities for success. And so let me kind of explain that. It's good to give kids, I mean, Jessica, you mentioned your kids 11 and under, a variety of activities. You know, kids can be in sports, kids can be in music, kids can be in robotics, kids can be in Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts. Too often, parents, when a youngster is young, just zero in on one activity. And then when a youngster hits the junior high and high school years, maybe that activity doesn't work out, especially if it's a sporting activity. You know, maybe parents just get their daughter into volleyball, and then she gets to junior high and she doesn't have the athletic ability to make the volleyball team in junior high. And so kids need success. And so the more activities they can be in. Now, we all know that balance is important and moderation is important. Some parents overschedule kids. But yet, if kids can have that one activity, so when they get into high school, they can be in band or be in music or be in the yearbook and feel good about themselves, it makes a difference. As I mentioned, I was a Lutheran high school teacher and assistant principal back in the 70s. And of course, the assistant principal at a high school is in charge of discipline. What always amazed me is that the youngsters who got into trouble usually did not have even one successful activity. They weren't in band, they weren't in yearbook, they weren't in a sporting activity. And so they didn't have, the kids that got into trouble did not have any successes. And I remember there was a or they could get good grades. I mean, that's a success too if a youngster has a high IQ and gets good grades in school. But I remember this one young man who had low grades. He was just a C student, wasn't involved in any activities at the high school, but he was a nice young man. And so it kind of went against my premise, my theme that kids that get into trouble don't have a successful activity. So one time I was able to catch him in the hall and just have a casual visit with him. And I said, you know, what do you do in life that helps you feel good about yourself. And this young man was in roller skating, and he was a terrific roller skater, and he would go to competitions. And so I started asking about it, and he started going on and on and on. And I said, you can brag to me, tell me about all the good things you're doing. But my point is, here he was not a good student, not in any activities at the high school, but he never got in trouble. He was very polite, just a nice Christian young man, very respectful. But he fulfilled what I said, that kids in high school need one activity that helps them feel good about themselves. Doesn't make any difference what it is, but just that one. And we see a lot of youngsters, we see shootings going on all the time. And I think it's because that individual does not have one success in their life to help them feel good about themselves. Now, I'll stop there and see if you have any comments on what I've said so far on chapter 5, and then I can keep going on.
I'd say
No.
keep going on, I guess.
Okay, I'll keep going on. One of the things I think is important, I'm going to mention this, would be good social skills. You know, using a person's name when you talk to them, when you meet, how do they meet someone and greet, shaking the person's hand, smiling at them. Research says the first 10 seconds when we meet somebody, that's the most important time. And so that big smile and firm handshake, not a wimpy handshake, not a claw fist handshake, but just teaching kids how to do that, how to answer the phone politely, even though we have cell phones today and not really home phones, but still just teaching politeness is important. And then I see a lot of youngsters who struggle making friends. And so I don't have this in this chapter on successful social skills, but I would say 99% of people believe that the way you make friends is to talk about yourself and to be interesting and tell people, well, I did this and I did that, and this is what I'm going to do this weekend. I'm going to a movie. And it's just the opposite what needs to happen. Kids and adults need to act interested in others and not be interesting. And they do that by asking how or what questions. Stay away from why. Why is kind of attacking and questions the other person's motive. But, you know, if a youngster goes to school tomorrow, and Jessica, you mentioned homeschooling, but, you know, what did you do last night as a family? You know, what did you have for dinner? How much did you play outside because of the beautiful weather? You know, and just acting interested in others helps so many kids who are very, very shy. You know, I've counseled a lot of shy kids over the years, and I practice with them in counseling, and I have mom and dad practice, teaching them how and what questions. You know, what are you going to do this summer? What's your favorite TV show? What's your favorite fast food restaurant? And that helps them overcome their shyness. Plus, they make friends because the other kids say, goodness gracious, that is the nicest person in the world. And the reason is they are being interested in the other person.
Yes, are your kids you're homeschooling in a cohort group that they do actually meet with other kids from time to time?
Right. And actually, so every week we meet once a week with this co-op, and the kids have to give like a 2 or 3 minute presentation. And at the end of the presentation, the kids in the audience are supposed to ask how or what questions to the presenter. So yeah, you guys must be reading the same book or the same book. Maybe
That's
our classical conversations group read your book. I don't know.
Well,
what's the age range when they get together? Is it a long?
It's pre-K to, for our foundations group, it's pre-K to 6, and then the curriculum changes and the expectations change for middle school up. But yeah, the pre-K to 6, every kid once a week stands up in front of their peers and presents on something. It might just be like a show and tell, something for like the younger ones, but some of the older ones will do a little research for their projects sometimes. And yeah, and then the kids in the audience asking the how or what questions. I never really thought about it as a form of like oh, that's a social skill that we're teaching them to make friends. So that was kind of interesting to me I might even point that out to my kids, like, oh, you could do this in a different situation, not like, it's not just a presenter, but this is actually how you're showing
point.
interest in somebody else.
That's very helpful to understand. Thank you, Jessica.
Yeah,
I-
we
Could
appreciate you sharing that.
Dr. Schroeder, can I just ask a question?
Well, sure.
You know, you're talking about social skills, which I agree is a great thing to teach children. How do you find children now with, it seems like every child of a certain age has a cell phone. Are you finding that in the children that you're counseling that there's a lot of lacking of these social skills because they're just using their phones and having less interaction, you know, face to face, where they're looking eyeball to eyeball, you know, when they're talking to somebody? Or
Yeah, you bring up a very good point. And the other thing is, and it can create, again, shyness, create introversion in a child. A lot of kids, if they do interact, not just it's like you said, the cell phone, but they'll play video games online with people all across the world.
Sure, yeah.
And they're not really interacting with them. They're talking to them through the computer. They're not always, sometimes they can put the headphones on and do it verbally. But yeah, there is the face-to-face interaction is limited. And of course, I know I'm kind of speaking to the choir. All of us realize the importance of limiting cell phone time, screen time. And, you know, I think parents often need to put cell phones in their bedroom when kids go to sleep, especially if the youngster doesn't have the self-discipline, not to go get the cell phone turned on late at night and be up late at night on the cell phone and then not have a good night's rest and be tired at school the next day. But yeah, and answer your question, you're right on target. I totally agree with you 100%.
Thank you.
No, you're welcome. Yes, you're very welcome. Let me mention, you know, we're going to run out of time here. Let me mention something I think is so very important in terms of, I have managing money through an allowance, and kind of all of us know the teaching kids, you know, maybe you can have 3 jars of a giving jar, a saving jar, and a spending jar. But one of the things I really think is important, and I don't think, at least Christians in America, and whether it's Lutherans or other Christian denominations, I think we too often talk about giving to church or giving to the ministry at the church, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I really think parents need to help children understand that we're giving to God. And I think to use the name of God, we're giving to our loving God, we're giving to our Heavenly Father. When we give an offering, it's not an offering to church, it's an offering to God. Yeah, we can write the church's name on the check, but I think kids need to have that close relationship with our Heavenly Father. And it's a little thing, but it really bothers me that we don't talk enough in our churches about, even if we give to, say, Samaritan's Purse, you know, which is a good Christian organization, to say we're going to give to God for Samaritan's Purse. And but anyway, I just want to throw that in. That is also in chapter 5. There's a lot of other material in chapter 5 as well. But I just think parents need to help that connection with God be strong. And one way to do that is talk about offerings to God, not to church, not to ministry, it's to God. Now, we're about out of time. I could mention one more idea.
Yeah, got one more to wrap up with.
Yeah, I can. I really believe in the importance of household chores, and you know, having regular household chores for kids. So because that gives a child the self-confidence It motivates a child. It gives a child self-discipline. And it doesn't have to be anything big. It could be a chore of spending 30 seconds taking the kitchen trash out to the outdoor trash can. It could be wiping off the kitchen table, which may only take 20 seconds. Now, and if kids are involved in activities, especially when they get older in junior high and high school, that is kind of their second job. But household chores, what I have found is parents that don't give kids household chores, often those children become irresponsible and they don't learn to give a good effort in other areas of life, whether it's academics and often are just not respectful to others as well. So chores do a lot of building of self-worth, creating responsibility, and creating self-discipline. And it's a reality of life. I mean, once children go into adulthood, they're going to have chores. I mean, all of us here tonight have chores. Now, somebody's not giving us chores, but we're cleaning up the kitchen and taking out the trash. And so kids need to learn that early in life. Well, I appreciate having this opportunity again. I hope there's been one or two thoughts that have made a difference. So, and I appreciate you, Carol and Dave, for all your hard work in putting all this together.
We very much appreciate your giving us your time and your continuous lessons like this, making them on recording.
Well, you're very welcome. God's blessings to all of you. Keep enjoying the beautiful sunshine, the warm weather. This has been fantastic. Yeah.
Sure.
And have a great day. Have a great day tomorrow.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Good night, all.
Okay, good night.
Thank you, Dave and Carol.
You're
Dr.
welcome.
Schroeder,
Bye-bye.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
very informative. I enjoyed it.
You're very welcome. To God be the glory. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.